No Durant. Harden. Just sucked. Oh well. And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is shockingly Wednesday, December 1st. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We put the 5-gamer to bed yesterday. We are back here now again with 9 games. Before we do anything, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live, and then make sure you're going to check out PrizePicks. We will touch on them in a bit. Well, let's start here. Congratulations are in order. Adam, second place yesterday.
Thanks. Yeah, always bittersweet, but obviously I'll take the money. So that was nice. Yeah. You know, maybe add a couple more TVs to the apartment.
How many more bottles of cologne are you going to get with that one? You're just going to get it delivered in like a 55-gallon drum.
Yeah. But like 6 of them in case I don't like the way a few of them smell.
Exactly. Well, yeah. You gotta at least disperse it a little bit. So yeah. Do you know what was in that lineup? What was like the key tenet of it?
I mean, Derrick Rose was a big piece just because he was 5% owned on DraftKings. Trying to find it now, but Chris Paul was only 8% owned, so he pushed that lineup forward. Got off to a good start, but then obviously benefited from Devin Booker being out as well. Yeah. Simons, McCollum, Chalk, Nurkic was the only piece that disappointed. But yeah, it was pretty much. I mean, it had Alec Burks, so it was Rose, Burks, Jaren Jackson at pretty low ownership, and then Chris Paul at pretty low ownership.
There we go. That's awesome. No, this is not a Coors that I'm drinking. It is a Diet Coke. I was thirsty and didn't feel like filling the water, and my in-laws left a 12-pack of Diet Coke in the beer fridge. So I'm gonna try to have one of these a day as my version of a treat. I think they're delicious.
Derrick Rose, Anthony Simons, Alec Burks, Jaren Jackson, Yusuf Nurkic, CJ McCollum, Scotty Barnes, Chris Paul.
There you go. I didn't get to two. I got like half the field on CJ yesterday, half on Nurk, which was sort of fine.
Yeah. CJ was my highest owned player going into the slate. He ended up being my highest owned player also, but he was my highest owned player regardless. I late swapped a lot before the 10 o'clock games because we basically had full information on how the first games had gone. So I just basically, plugged in their actual scores as the projection and reran everything.
You and I did the exact same thing then, which ended up getting me to like way more Terrence Davis and grossness that I didn't want. I had, basically lock button Simons on FanDuel at 4K, which I was more than okay with. Yeah. Didn't totally work out, but it certainly didn't kill me either.
Yeah. I had like 36% Simons originally. And then once my low owned guys early did really well, I ended up with like 70% Simons. And then he scored 2.5 points in the first quarter. And I was like, you've got to be shitting me. I really just like optimized to get this trash into my lineup. But he ended up coming through.
That is the worst feeling in the world. Like, oh, should I touch anything? Like these lineups were made perfectly to start, but in all actuality, you have to go back, especially in a situation like this where you have banked the entire game. Like, exactly. If you're not redoing your lineups in that moment, you shouldn't be trying to play like 150 lineups anywhere.
Yeah, and this lineup actually. So there were 2 lineups when I not to get too into how I late swap, but I used a little bit of randomness on most lineups. There were 2 lineups that I just completely optimized, and this was one of them because all I had from the early games were Derrick Rose, Alec Burks, Jaren Jackson, Scotty Barnes, who all just went nuts. And like Rose was 5%, Jackson was 12%, Scotty was only 22. So
you want the optimal there.
I just want the optimal, and so this was one of the 2 that I did that with.
Yeah. I do. We do the exact same thing there. I usually put like 5% randomness on just because I still want that little bit of wiggle between any guys that are like right next to each other. Yeah. And then I'll start like manually changing a couple personal exposures because someone will inevitably fly to like 90%. It's like, okay, I got to bring that back down to 40 or whatever it was.
Yeah. For when I initially crunch, I use like a full standard deviation of randomness. And then when I late swap, I use a half. So it ends up, because of how Fantasy Cruncher works also, it just ends up not like it doesn't make things too wild, but it just makes it so instead of getting 100% of somebody, I get like 85%.
Absolutely. And then one thing I wish FC did have would be an individual lineup recrunch button. Like I want to know, or even like the shadow of what that lineup was. I'd like a toggle to know what it swapped from to.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Or just simply like, if you do have randomness on it, I'd like to look at my highest projected lineup and like click a or like an optimized button there with no qualifications to know what my deviation is to.
Yeah, I mean, what I do there, especially on a slate like last night where we had a lot of information.
Time, yeah.
Time also. But like what I did for the ones that I optimized, I just clicked through and said, okay, what lineups do I have? All three of Derrick Rose, Jaren Jackson, Alec Burks, and then optimized those. And I looked to make sure that they didn't have Aldridge in them, which because then I would have been like, nope, still need random guys.
Yep.
But they didn't. And so it was just like, okay, well, I'll just optimize these.
I think people will probably appreciate having a little bit of late swap conversation because it's something that people will ask a lot of questions about. And it's so hard to talk about it like when you're not doing it.
I never even really had a good process for it until this year. I think I finally built some stuff that I thought made sense.
Were you still worried about leverage in those lineups? Were you setting a threshold?
Yeah, so I set it so that all of the lineups I create are positively leveraged with the exception of the two that I optimized because I already knew that they were. But like last night, for example, it basically ended up not mattering because since I did everything with actual scores, like I had Derrick Rose being 12. He should have been like 12 times higher owned than he was because he had like a 60% chance of being the optimal or whatever at 5%. So basically any lineup I had Derrick Rose, it was just like optimizing more or less.
That makes sense. All righty. Well, we got 9 games to talk about, and I know you haven't seen this slate in the same way that I have so far today. It's hard. It's really, really hard. Pricing's tight. There is not a lot of value out there to speak of. We got a lot to talk about, and there's not even all that much news that we're waiting on. So let's just start it off here. First one up on the docket, the Atlanta Hawks, 1.5 point dogs in Indiana, 217 total. And we're going to start it off talking about guys that aren't playing today. On the Atlanta side, no Bogdanovich, and we've got a Q tag on Cam Reddish. For the Pacers, Justin Holiday is now in the health and safety protocols. We still have the questionable tag on Miles Turner. So as we start on Atlanta, nobody in double digits in ownership for the Hawks on FanDuel. On DraftKings, we get Cam Reddish, Kevin Huerter, John Collins, and Trae Young, all in the 10 to 15% range. None of that really surprises me. Trae Young is a little bit higher than I would expect just because he's only point guard eligible and there's just a lot of studs on this slate. But I don't see anything too crazy from the Collins, Huerter, Reddish ownership. Obviously, Reddish's status will skew that a bit moving forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. Looking at DraftKings pricing, the only thing that really stands out, I mean, Huerter is cheap at 4,400, and if Reddish were to sit, who also is cheap at 3,400, then that would help to solidify Huerter's minutes and Gallo's minutes at 4,200. But amongst the main guys, John Collins at 6,900. This is the first time in a while we've had a real gap between him and Clint Capella. Capella's at 8,500 on DraftKings. Collins is at 6,900, and you're expecting similar playing time for those guys. I mean, you can kind of count on around 34 minutes from both of them. Collins played 39 and a half last game. Capella played 35. But, I think that when you start to get that ownership gap, it just makes Collins look a little bit better.
Yeah, I do like Collins quite a bit there. If Reddish is playing 3,400 shooting guard, small forward, no Bogdanovich, I assume I end up thinking that he's the best play on Atlanta.
Yeah, most likely. Like I think you would get Solomon Hill starting. That's typically what we've seen when Bogdanovich is out, but it would open more minutes for Reddish as well. And it makes it easier for him to potentially get into the closing lineup.
Yeah, absolutely there. And if Reddish is out, Solomon Hill is going to play probably like 30 minutes and be basically useless, but at least he's the flat minimum. Do we see a little bit more Gallo? Does it immediately go to just like TLC or something and they call it a day?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to kind of get a read for that based on the last game, but it's tough. They ran really weird rotations there. Like you had Solomon Hill start the second half, but he still only played 5 minutes and 25 seconds. TLC got some run. I don't necessarily expect that to be the case again. Gallo basically got the same run he normally gets in the second half. I think it would create a situation if Reddish is out where it could go a variety of ways. Like you could get, they could play DeLon Wright if they wanted to. I don't think that they necessarily would, but you could get him, you could get TLC, you could get more Huerter and Gallo. So I think it's just, and Solomon Hill could play 32 minutes also. So I think it's a situation where you would want to set rules. I wouldn't be super confident in any of it. I think Gallo would be the spot that I got to first, and then kind of just throwing darts at Hill and TLC would make some sense.
If Turner is in, does this feel like a night where they close Collins Capella?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's been most of them recently anyway.
That's true.
We haven't really seen quite as much Capella losing closing minutes recently. But I do think that if Turner is out, there's the chance that you see that happen here.
Yeah. Capella last 4 games, 30, 32, 29, 35. So I got him in for 32 minutes. Anything else for Atlanta?
No.
All righty. On the Indy side, replacing the Justin Holiday minutes will be the most interesting piece. Yeah, that's generally how it works. Yeah. Unless you're drinking an iced coffee, at which point it would be way weirder.
Yeah, no, not an iced coffee. Wish it was, but just kind of totally forgot that it would be hot.
Go grab a piece of ice and toss it in there if you want to. No Justin Holiday. We don't know the status on Miles Turner right now, but you should probably play a little bit of him at 5,900 on DraftKings. A lot of ownership, though, coming in on this one. We've got 21% on FanDuel, 34 on DraftKings for Chris Duarte. We can have a bigger conversation about that shortly. Levert is probably the most popular overall play here. One of my favorites for the day. 42% owned on FanDuel, however, 27 on DraftKings. And then we get Brogdon, 34% owned on FanDuel at 7,200, 19 on DraftKings. There is a lot to like for Indy here. I don't know if I want to chase that monster ownership on Duarte, though.
I think Duarte is the scariest one just because the minutes can disappear. If Justin Holiday's out, then that obviously makes him look a lot better because that's a lot of minutes that
he is out, 100% out.
Oh, wait, I thought he was questionable.
So health and safety protocols. Turner is questionable.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So then Duarte, I think, does look really good because the minutes just kind of have to be there. You had gotten 30 minutes the game before from Duarte. Last game, you got 21, but Holiday played 38 and a half. It just opens up so many minutes that I think Duarte looks, not that he can't fail, but I think he looks really good at 4K flat. Levert looks good at 5,400. Brogdon at 7,700, still playing huge minutes. Played 40 last game. He had played 41 in regulation the game before. Just, over a fantasy point per minute guy. He looks great. So I think that this team just looks fantastic.
What do you assume for Chris Duarte's minutes here? We're talking like 32, 34?
I would say 30,
playing 32.
It. 30 to 32 is safe.
Okay. Yeah, like obviously a great point per dollar play. I think he becomes a very easy guy to like not really prioritize in a larger field GPP.
I think that's fair. Like in the sense where there's a good chance that Chris Duarte is one of the guys tonight where, he's projected for 34% and he ends up being like 58% or something.
Right. And you're happy that you'd rather have 0 at that moment.
Right. Yeah. There's a good chance. This is the type of guy that we've seen this year where, he's a good play, but he's just like an obvious point per dollar value. And we've just seen the field go absolutely crazy, like completely ignoring the fact that there's still a range of outcomes here. And that if he scores 30 fantasy points, that doesn't mean he's necessarily even in the optimal lineup. Certainly that kind of guy where he could just, his ownership could just skyrocket.
His ownership looks like it would if he also had the small forward eligibility.
Right.
It would make a lot more sense to me. He is just shooting guard in 34%. I just don't want to be there for that kind of that's too much at this moment. Now, it is a function of this slate having basically no value anywhere. I think that as we start getting news, that'll come down. But I don't want to put people off of it. We definitely need like a better way to describe this guy is like a really good cash play. And his GPP status is tenuous.
Yeah, and it's not even that he's a bad tournament play because that's like the mistake that you see people make too. Is
that's
just
a good point.
Oh, he's popular. I can't play him in tournaments. Yeah, you can. You just have to find alternatives. But what we're saying, so like right now, for example, he has a 20% chance, according to Alex's Boom Bust tool, of being in the optimal lineup. He's getting 34% ownership. So on the one hand, he's projected to be overowned. He's also projected to be one of the most likely players to be in the optimal lineup. So that means he's a very good play, but you just need to have low-owned plays around him. The concern that you and I were expressing, though, is that this has been so far a year where you've gotten really concentrated ownership on like the chalkiest plays. So while like if Duarte comes in at 34% owned with a 20% chance of being in the optimal, even though he's overowned, like he has a 34% boom percentage as well. So that's kind of a point where it's like, okay, that's still a very reasonable ownership. If he is actually 55% owned, like we've seen happen with a lot of chalk this year. Last night it was Svi, it was Precious Achua. The night before that it was Lou Dort. If you see something like that, then it's just like, holy shit, I don't want this guy at all. So that's kind of the concern that we're expressing. It's not that we don't think, you don't just want to think in terms of point per dollar value, because Chris Duarte at 4K can score 30 fantasy points and be a good play, but that's still not even a raw score that you have to have. You're happy that he scored 30, but it's whatever. But then the trade-off is the games where, which do still exist, the games where he scores 20 fantasy points. If he's like 50% owned, you're in such a phenomenal spot if you don't have him. Yep. But it's kind of seemed like the field is just ignoring both of those aspects, and they're just saying, oh, 30 points, good, like move on. And on a 9-game slate, there are plenty of alternatives that you can look to. So yeah, definitely not trying to talk anyone off of Duarte. I think he's one of the best point per dollar values. I think he looks very, very good. It's just more of a reminder to think in terms of range of outcomes and not just, blindly be plugging in median projections and then jamming it all in on the one guy that, projects a point or two higher.
Yeah. We're going to find multiple different options in and around this price tag that aren't all that far away from Chris Duarte, that are going to be in the single digits in ownership, that work in GPPs as like that one pivot off of an optimal. How do we manage Caris LeVert? 42% owned on FanDuel, 27 on DraftKings. Obviously, his minutes should be more secure with no Justin Holiday there. He's been playing more as of late. The question then becomes, is he the 0.89 fantasy point per minute guy that we've had at FanDuel for the past 30 days, or is he more like the 1 fantasy point per minute guy that we're used to?
I think he's around the 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy. So also I'd wanted to pull it up and I hadn't typed it in yet, but Duarte has played 9 games with Brogdon, LeVert, and Sabonis this year. He's still at 0.83 DraftKings points per minute. Granted, a lot of that's been off the bench, but he's still, even if you give him, 0.75 fantasy points per minute, he does project as a good play. So just kind of reiterate that. LeVert, though, I think, so he's played 11 games now with Brogdon and Sabonis. He's at 0.87 DraftKings points per minute. 24.2% usage rate means that there is still upside there. The problem is just that the peripherals aren't really there. He has a 14.8% assist percentage. He has a 5.7% rebounding percentage. If Malcolm Brogdon is going to play nearly every minute of the game, that doesn't leave a whole lot of time for LeVert to play without him anyway. And they're also not staggering LeVert's minutes really. So he's playing almost all of his minutes with Brogdon and Sabonis on the floor. So all of those things hurt him. But at the same time, if you just take his average production so far and you give him 34 minutes at 5,400, he looks good. And then there is still the potential any given game for him to do better, because it's not like he's getting shut out of usage. He's still getting up plenty of shots. It's just that he's a scoring dependent player at this point.
Yeah, like I like LeVert more than I like Duarte today, given that ownership.
There's not that big of a gap on DraftKings, but I mean, it's 34 to 27.
Right. Like I think it's a lot easier to want to get to LeVert in a GPP than it is Duarte at those particular numbers.
I think it's like about the same to me. I mean, LeVert's $1,400 more expensive. His chance of being in the optimal lineup is 5 points lower. His boom percentage is 10 points lower. And then his ownership is like 7 points lower. So I think they're basically the same kind of play.
Okay. I think I'm just super high on Caris LeVert, and I hate it because I hate him. I've thought he sucked ever since he was on the Nets.
Yeah. The thing is, like, his usage rate in those games that they've all played together is higher than Malcolm Brogdon's. It's higher than Sabonis's. They're both at like 22.5%. He's just not doing much at all in the way of rebounding and assists, but he's still certainly capable of just like getting 40 fantasy points.
Yeah. Anything else we want to add here? If Turner ends up out, we're going to be going to quite a bit more Sabonis, I assume. Yeah,
more Sabonis. He always looks better when Turner is out. Also, if TJ McConnell starts again, I mean, he played 34.5 minutes last game. That really hurt me because he was like 3% owned. I jammed in a bunch and then he just did nothing. But, that would be good. You could potentially in this matchup, though, see Goga slide into the starting lineup if Turner is out against, against
maybe. I don't know. They don't seem to ever play him.
He played almost the entire second half last game.
He
played 18 minutes in the second half.
Goga?
Yeah.
I've got him in for 6 minutes. So
Popcorn Machine might be lying.
I think that is the case.
3, 4. Yeah. Unless Indiana played a lot of 6-man rotations.
No.
At the same time, he didn't play that much in the second half.
Goga played 5.8 minutes based on what I have here.
All right. Yeah. So he take that back.
Yeah.
I still think he could get the spot start. I think it's less likely now that I know he actually did not play the final 18 minutes of the game.
Sure. I'm with you there. Anything else for Indiana?
No.
Okay. I was like, I don't know, man. I'm pretty sure that he didn't get any sort of legitimate run. They don't seem to play him
according
ever.
to Popcorn Machine, Indiana closed with Levert, Holiday, Brogdon, McConnell, Sabonis, and Goga.
Oh, okay. Did they win?
They did not, which is really embarrassing for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to play with an extra guy, you really need to get that shit done in the end. Tyler Sappington with the super chat had Patty Mills instead of D Rose. Difference between $100K and $500 on DraftKings. Frustrating. Yes, that is frustrating.
Yes, it is.
Like, obviously, you don't want to get yourself in situations where you do that, but like a 1v1 swap of Patty Mills and Derrick Rose yesterday is not like all that outlandish.
No, not at all.
Like, that's two guys that were probably comparably owned, I guess, yesterday. And one taking $100,000 from you that one stings. All right, we're through the first game. That one had a little bit more to talk about. We're on to Denver at Orlando. And the Nuggets are, if you want to know how bad Orlando is, the Nuggets are 8.5-point favorites in Orlando, and the Nuggets are walking wounded, so much so that we have breaking news on this show. Austin Rivers is now entering the health and safety protocols and set to miss a couple games. So as if Denver wasn't down enough people, let's lop off another one. We'll start on the Denver side, where I'm going to be playing quite a bit of Nikola Jokic at 11K on FanDuel and 11.8 on DraftKings. I got him projected for 1.81 FanDuel points per minute in this spot. I just love playing this dude. Will Barton and Monty Morris are both around 15% owned on FanDuel. No one is getting ownership on DraftKings outside of Jokic. I don't get the sense you're going to tell me you like anybody all that much here, although the Rivers news certainly opens up a couple more minutes in the backcourt.
Yeah, and I mean, it's obviously a good matchup, but I'm with you. Jokic is the one that really stands out. The issue with Jokic, and we saw it the other day, is there's just so many high upside centers on a slate of this size. It's pretty likely that a couple of these mid-range guys go for 50 plus. So you need that 70 plus fantasy point game from Jokic to really be happy you rostered him. But at the same time, that is extremely possible. It's a bad Orlando team in general. Jokic this year without Porter on the floor has been around 1.9 DraftKings points per minute. So I think he looks really good. Saw somebody yesterday say that it was on Twitter, hasn't played Jokic all year because he's been overpriced. I'm not really sure what Jokic he was referring to, but
one of his brothers, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Jokic is the best point per minute fantasy guy in the NBA right now. So he's great. Obviously, you just need to pay attention to the rest of the center position as well, because there's a lot of good options there. But with Jokic being back, it makes guys like Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, Monte Morris, Jeff Green all look a bit worse. Not to say that they can't have success here, and they will be low owned, but they're essentially priced for Nikola Jokic to be out, and they all obviously lose production when he's back. With Austin Rivers being out, throwing some shots at Bones Highland is kind of interesting to me. Not that I'm sure chat needs any encouragement there because they love the guy, but he played 20 and a half minutes. So he played about 20 minutes, excluding garbage time last game. You potentially could throw a couple more minutes on there with Austin Rivers being out as well. And I think it also solidifies those minutes a little bit. Also potentially a little bit more playing time for Campazzo at 3,900. Not that either of them are going to be priorities, but if more value doesn't open up today, then I think kind of just throwing darts at those guys makes sense. For the season, Highland's at 0.96 DraftKings points per minute. Campazzo's at 0.75. So I would go to Highland first since he's ahead of Campazzo in the rotation and he's the better fantasy producer.
Closing lineup for Denver: Jokic, Gordon, Barton, Morris, Green.
Most likely, yeah.
Does Austin Rivers just become like one random dude?
I think he probably becomes a few more minutes for he could become a couple more minutes for Campazzo. So Campazzo played about 22 minutes last game outside of garbage time. I think it's likely you get around the same playing time there, maybe a couple minutes more. Highland maybe gets to like 22 to 24 minutes. And then, I don't know, like Chanchar gets whatever's left.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking about it. Like if Rivers moves out, this feels like Marcus Howard just plays like 18 minutes instead or something stupid. And
I think
it ultimately becomes like slightly meaningless.
I don't think that there's one guy that was already in the rotation that just adds on like 6 minutes or 8 minutes or anything.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is most of Bones Highland's minutes were already coming alongside Austin Rivers. Most of Campazzo's minutes were already coming alongside Rivers. I think the biggest benefit for those guys is that they're not going to lose minutes to Austin Rivers, obviously.
Yeah.
Like there's one less guy to take those minutes. But outside of maybe adding a couple of minutes to Highlander Campazzo, I think for the most part, it just goes to somebody else.
Okay. We're on the same page there. It's just Denver just always feels like a next man up type guy, where if you're taking a guy from the bench, I don't think they're bumping all that many people or cutting rotations. I think you're just going to see somebody you don't care about.
Yeah. And I think Howard, you're probably right. I'd said Chanchar just because he was the only other guy that played last game, but Howard would just make more sense.
Mr. Baseballers trolling me in chat, trying to tell me that Karis LeVert would be an all-star if he played on Houston or Oklahoma City. And I can't even functionally deal with how bad Karis LeVert is in relationship to what he thinks, but we're going to move on to Orlando.
Karis LeVert's another one that like posts monster fantasy numbers when he's on a team with nobody. And so everybody thinks he's like an all NBA player that just isn't getting the right opportunities.
I talked about it on the process show, oddly enough, today. Somebody was asking like what true shooting is. True shooting numbers percentile for LeVert over the past 6 seasons. 20th this season, 48% true shooting, by the way. That is dog shit at 27% usage. Last year, 28% usage, 29th percentile true shooting. 2 years ago, 29% usage, 23rd percentile true shooting. We're talking about one of the most inefficient basketball players in the league that is allowed to take a lot of shots.
Yeah, and the argument, absolutely not. LeVert is a highly skilled player, dude. It's the NBA; they all are.
Yeah,
they're either a big or they're highly skilled. Like it's not. It's the same thing. Yesterday, people were like, "Boucher can ball." Like, yeah, man, he's a professional basketball player.
Yeah, I'm not grading him against everyone that's ever played basketball. I'm grading these people against their peers. If I say someone sucks, I don't think that he sucks because I think that I can beat him. Like. He sucks in relationship to the rest of the people in the league. All right, here. Well, you ready for this one? You've been saved, Adam. Do you realize this? Jalen Suggs has a broken thumb. Yeah.
Jalen Suggs and Jalen Green being injured is probably the best thing that could happen to my bankroll.
Bad week for Jalen's. Cole Anthony is back. Franz Wagner is not on the injury report. We have no Jalen Suggs for the near future, injured thumb. Franz Wagner is 13% owned on FanDuel, 10% on DraftKings. Wendell Carter, 17 on FanDuel, 17 on DraftKings. Nobody else is in double digits, but unfortunately, I think like 7 of these guys are viable rotational pieces for a DFS roster today.
Yeah, we're kind of back to that same thing with Orlando because now you're taking out Suggs, although at least we have gotten some of these guys priced up a little bit, but it's still some value here.
Yeah, it's like here's how everybody came out of my sim. I don't even need to say the names. 8, 5, 6, 9, 8, 4, 9, 4. Like, yes, basically everybody that's going to play 24 minutes or more should be in like 4% of your lineups, and there are no legitimate priorities for me. I don't like Orlando at all, and I want them to get relegated.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough matchup too. Cole Anthony has seen a bump this year when Suggs isn't on the floor, which isn't surprising. His usage rate goes up to 28.5%. He's averaged 1.25 DraftKings points per minute. Not a huge sample, only 306 minutes, but 33.9% assist percentage, 28.9% usage rate, and actually a good basketball player. So I don't mind Cole Anthony, but he's also not cheap. He's almost 8K. I don't mind Wendell Carter Jr. at 6,300. But also a difficult matchup here. I think Chuma Okeke, who played 28 minutes last game, at least according to the Popcorn Machine, assuming that they're not lying again, he played 28 minutes last game. You could certainly see similar run here with Suggs out. He's only 3,800. I think he looks okay, but I'm with you. I mean, this is a really, really difficult spot and just overall unappealing spot. Denver's one of the slowest teams in the league. They're not bad defensively. Orlando is very bad. So I think mostly for me, even though they're not the cheapest guys, Cole Anthony and Wendell Carter, just because of the level that they produce at, and Anthony actually being a good NBA player. But that's obviously also assuming that Anthony's not on any sort of restriction.
Yeah, I gave him 32 minutes just because of how long he's been out. I don't know if he just goes immediately to the 34, 36 range, but
yeah, I was looking now. I couldn't even remember how long he's been out because I know it feels like a long time, but I thought it also may have just been because it just is so miserable talking about Orlando without him. I mean, he's only been out
6 games.
Yeah, he's been out for like 10 days.
Yeah.
11 days.
Yeah, look, I like him, but I'm happy that I don't have to go crazy for it. That's for sure.
Yeah,
see
for
the
sure.
usage
It's more. I assume he's getting like no ownership right now.
7% on both sides. Like,
yeah, so I
that's
mean
fine. That's what it should be. Yeah.
The only piece here that like doesn't make a ton of sense to me is why Franz Wagner is getting 10% ownership at 5,500.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wish the price was a little bit closer. Yeah, I don't know. He's
fine, I guess, but
he's a 0.83 guy in my model, 0.83 in the last 30 days, and 0.83 in today's game. I think I figured out what he is today.
Yeah, he's 0.75 DraftKings points without Suggs on the floor this year. He's got about an 18.5% usage rate. He is 0.81 DraftKings points overall this season. Like, I'm not saying that I think he's bad or anything. I'm just kind of surprised that he's showing up that much given the matchup and the fact that there's 9 games.
All righty. Schedule for the rest of the day. We've got the NFL Strategy Show Ownership Edition at 11 a.m., Jock Market NBA Show at 1, the NHL Strategy Show at 2, the No House Advantage NFL Show at 4. Adam will be back for the deeper dive at 4:45, and then NBA Live before lock at 6. Tons of shows, man. 6 more live pieces of content, plus a ton of pre-records. NBA projections are free, as are NHL rankings. We move on to Minnesota at Washington. 3.5-point dogs for Minnesota. Washington, 215 total here. And this one's kind of tough to talk about because we got a few Q tags on Minnesota. In fact, we've got no Patrick Beverley, questionable on Anthony Edwards, Jared Vanderbilt, and Jaden McDaniels. Vanderbilt and McDaniels were both out this past game. They are all out with flu-like symptoms. My assumption is that all of these guys are playing, and the flu-like symptom stuff that we've been seeing is just simply guys getting their boosters. I don't know how true that's going to be.
That makes sense.
So my expectation is that all of the Minnesota guys are going to be in today. Who knows? Like, if one of them doesn't feel good, obviously somebody can be out. We've got Towns 10 to 15% owned on FanDuel and DraftKings. Russell is 11 on FanDuel. I really like Anthony Edwards. Well, maybe not really like, but I like Anthony Edwards a bit at 8,100 on FanDuel, shooting guard, small forward if he is in. If we assume everybody's in, though, I don't think Minnesota's all that interesting.
Yeah, their prices have come up a bit. I still think that getting to Russell, Edwards, Towns is fine, but you have the opportunity cost issue at center with Towns. Russell has averaged about 34 minutes per game, about 1.15 to 1.2 DraftKings points per minute since he came back from injury. So he looks fine, but jumped $500 in salary since his last game. Edwards has seen a decrease in usage with Russell back, but still has a high ceiling, still plays a lot of minutes, but he's also expensive now. Vanderbilt's salary came up. I'm with you. I think that the ceiling on those guys is still fine if they're not getting much ownership. They are the type of guys that you can mix in with your very popular Chris Duarte, but I'm not going out of my way to get to them.
Okay. I don't have anything else really here to add for Minnesota. If they hemorrhage everybody again and it's no Vanderbilt and no McDaniels at the very least, like, I'll probably end up playing more Taurean Prince than I want to, and that will hurt. Maybe a little bit more Naz Reid, which I won't be, well, at least on DraftKings, I won't be all that mad about, but it's not like Minnesota opens themselves up to be like really awesome either. I don't want to have to play Josh Okogie.
Yeah.
Your Washington Wizards. Interesting pricing here today too. Nobody's really pulling a ton of ownership. Like, Kuzma's at 15 on DK, 10 on FanDuel. Dinwiddie's about 10 on both sites. Harrell's about 10 on both sites. Beal is around 8. Only 9K gets point guard, shooting guard on DraftKings now too, so which is interesting. What do you want to do with Washington? I think it's probably Dinwiddie as my favorite option, but no real priorities here either.
Yeah, it's the same thing that it's kind of been with Washington all season long. Beal is not really producing at a level to justify his salary right now. He's just kind of in a weird spot. Like, if you shaved $1,000 off of him, he would probably start being like really popular, but also that's probably where he should be. He's only averaging 1.11 DraftKings points per minute this year, 31% usage rate, 29% assist percentage, but Dinwiddie's cutting into his production at least a little bit. So he's just not somebody that's that easy to get to. There's some upside because the usage is there. If he actually does have a good shooting game, he can put up a big score, but there's just so many alternatives around him that look better. Where I normally get to on Washington, if I get anywhere, is the center spot, because on average, Harrell and Gafford, neither one look great at their salaries, but you get enough games where Gafford plays 24 minutes or Harrell plays 30 minutes, that they can really exceed their salaries. So I think the volatility makes them somewhat appealing, even though they're not safe.
I wish I had more to add here for Washington, but this is just like a very uneventful game to me. It could be better, but I'm not all that interested here. Let's keep up that theme in terms of being uninterested in things. Philly at Boston. Philly 2-point dogs, 211 total. Yuck. Like just pure across the board yuck. For Philly, we kind of have everybody now, finally, for like the first time in ages. So that's always good to see. For Boston, we're getting likely Jaylen Brown back. He was questionable. He's questionable with injury management, but I believe he's going to be back. Robert Williams and Dennis Schroeder are both not on the injury report. Highest owned guy in this game, Tobias Harris at 7% on FanDuel. Next highest, Tobias Harris on DraftKings at 3.5. This game is fully unowned, or at least Philly is fully unowned. I mean, I guess I'm like, okay, like mildly interested in Maxey or Embiid when they don't pull any ownership, but this is a terrible spot.
Yeah, pretty tough spot. And this is just another team where you've gotten pricing elevated from Embiid being out, and now Embiid's back. And obviously he cuts into everyone's production. 8K for Harris, I think, is probably the easiest spot to get to here, but even that doesn't look that good. He's still over a fantasy point per minute guy with Embiid. He's still likely to play, 34 minutes or so if this game's competitive. Embiid is fine at 10-7. He's obviously got a high ceiling. The issue is just that he's $1,100 less expensive than Jokic. Jokic is just on an entirely different tier. And then outside of that, you just have the same opportunity cost issue at center that you always have. So this is another team that's just really difficult to get to.
Yeah, I don't like, just no interest really at all. It's crazy. Well, it doesn't get much better on the Boston side. Highest owned player on Boston is 13% owned Al Horford on FanDuel. Power forward center, 6,300. Sure, it's probably a little bit higher than I want. Next closest is 5.9% to Schroeder. I find Boston just as uninteresting as Philly. Assuming Jaylen Brown is in.
Right. It's kind of the same thing. Schroeder's salary increased a bit. Tatum's salary increased a bit, and then you bring Jaylen Brown back into the fold, and he just kind of takes stuff away. I do think the Boston side looks a little bit more appealing than the Philly side, just because you have a little bit cheaper pricing. Dennis Schroeder at 6,300 still certainly has a ceiling. 5,800 on Robert Williams. He's not been great this year. He certainly has plenty of foul risk in this spot as well, but does have a lot of block upside and is relatively inexpensive. So nothing that really stands out to me from Boston either, but I think I probably get to Boston before I get to most of the Philly guys.
Yeah, I don't think that I'm getting too much of anything here. I did get to a little bit of Schroeder since he's only 6K or 6% owned on FanDuel at 5,900, but there are no priorities in this game at all.
Agreed.
It's gross. Guess what, man? It's not getting any better as we keep going on. Cleveland at Miami. Cleveland 7.5 point dogs, 204 total. That is the lowest on the slate by quite a bit. The highest owned guy in this game is 7% owned Evan Mobley on DraftKings at 6,500. I think that's pretty reasonable. I don't see a single priority for Cleveland today against Miami, unless Miami loses all of the guys that are supposed to that are questionable today.
Wait, you don't.
I'll be more interested in Cleveland if Jimmy Butler and Bam don't play.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm following.
Otherwise, right now, this is going to be a slog, and Cleveland's offense sucks to begin with.
Yeah, Mobley at 6,500, I think looks reasonable. That's probably the first spot that I would get to from Cleveland. But it's another team that's kind of just gotten a bunch of guys back recently. Mobley's playing time is right back to where it was before he got hurt, though. He played 35 and a half minutes last game, lost the final basically 4 minutes to garbage time. If you're going to get 38 minutes, give or take, from Evan Mobley at 6,500, I do like that.
He's basically 1% owned on FanDuel right now at 7,400. He also now has center and power forward, as does Jared Allen. So they are like a little fun combo to get to. That said, it's still Cleveland, and this team isn't very good. And then we go to Miami. Now, this could open up a lot. The problem is we have no idea what information we're going to get. Q tag on Jimmy Butler, and it's not like a sickness type thing. tailbone injury is real. Like I have no concept of how healthy he's going to be. Bam Adebayo is questionable with the right thumb injury. Looks like we're getting Tyler Hero back. We still don't have Markieff Morris, and Dwayne Dedmon is questionable. There's not a lot of actionable items here. No one is owned on DraftKings. Highest owned guy is PJ Tucker at 4.5%. Take what you want from that information. Kyle Lowry is 12% owned on FanDuel. Bam's not really owned. I like Jimmy Butler, a shooting guard, small forward at 4% ownership. I don't know if he's going to play. Status here obviously matters a lot. If any one of Butler or Bam are out, it just makes Kyle Lowry, the other guy, and Tyler Hero look a little bit better. Again, there are no priorities for Miami right now.
Yeah, same boat if everybody's in. If guys are out, it kind of becomes self-explanatory. You know, if Butler sits and Bam is in, Bam looks better. If Bam sits, Dedmon looks better. If Bam and Butler sit, Hero looks great, you know, and Lowry looks better. So if everybody's in, not much stands out. As guys start sitting, then, you know, obviously you get guys looking better that are in.
Yeah, I'd like to bring more information to the table for this one. I just don't know how we do that. I don't see it. We need people to just be like fully removed from this. Otherwise, it's like I said, the Denver, Orlando, Minnesota, Washington, Philly, Boston, Cleveland, Miami. It's a really, really ugly start to today's slate. Let's talk about something that's not ugly. I think that's the thing that we should do next. And that right there is PrizePicks, the presenting sponsor of this show. Now, I've talked about PrizePicks a lot today because they are the presenting sponsor of the process, presenting sponsors of the contenders video. And now we get them again here. You could use the promo code Awesemo when you sign up at PrizePicks to get a $100 first match deposit bonus. Perfect opportunity to get a little bit of extra money. And you don't have to worry about like sharks or optimizers. You're building up to 5-player lineups that can net you 10x your entry fee. And you're looking about, it's more of a player prop scenario. You're looking for overs and unders. You're not trying to score the highest amount of points. You can download the app in the App Store, go to Google Play, or just go to prizepicks.com. We have free player prop tools at awesemo.com that can help you make your best decisions. You can also get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up and make a deposit at PrizePicks. You'll get an email from 24 to 48 hours after you redeem your free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. I'm going to hit you up with maybe 1 or 2 PrizePicks. We'll see where you land on them. Still getting logged in here. But if we look at fantasy scores, not a ton of them out there right now, but we can talk at least a little bit about the Denver and Orlando game. How do you feel about over under 57 fantasy points for Nikola Jokic?
Over?
Yep. I got that by 4 at the very least right now. Another one that looks interesting that isn't fun at all to talk about, 28 for Aaron Gordon.
Over? I don't feel I don't feel as good about that one as I do the Jokic one.
Yeah, I would much rather take the over on the Jokic one as well. Then I'll hit you with a single stat as we're getting down the line a little bit. Over under 16.5 points for chat's favorite, Karis LeVert.
How many?
16.5 real points.
Over.
Yeah, I have the over as well. All righty. Well, let's move it on. Thank you, PrizePicks, by the way. I've been touting you all day, and I'm very happy to do so. Now we're on to a game that actually has a real total. The Charlotte Hornets are 8.5-point dogs in Milwaukee with a 230 total. That is 25 points more than the Cleveland-Miami game that we just talked about. PJ Washington, 31% owned on FanDuel at power forward center, 4,900, 12% on DraftKings, where he's only 5,100. We can have a bigger conversation about why that's only 12%. Nobody else in double digits on DK. Nobody in even close to double digits on FanDuel. I really like Miles Bridges if he's 3% owned. I like Kelly Oubre quite a bit at 5,600, shooting guard, small forward if he's 2% owned. Feels like Charlotte's getting slept on a bit here.
Yeah, I mean, the pricing I think is pretty efficient, but at the same time, it's like relative to the rest of the slate. I mean, the pricing is pretty efficient everywhere because we don't have a lot of injuries right now. So when you have a team like Charlotte, where, you know, Bridges at 7,800 is still likely to play 36 to 38 minutes. LaMelo at 10.4, we know is going to play, you know, 35, 36 minutes. He's around a 1.4 DraftKings point per minute guy. Rozier's playing time has been going up. You have PJ Washington most likely starting, and if not, you know, probably still playing decent minutes. So I'm with you, at least the way things look right now. If other stuff doesn't open up, I like getting to these Charlotte guys. It's not really one guy in particular for me that stands out, but it's more so just, you know, mixing in these guys because I think that they're one of they're like they're not underpriced. They're just more favorably priced than a lot of the teams we've talked about.
Oh my God, chat, incredible. What happens when PJ Washington is not named the starter tonight? What's the panic sell-off for no reason?
What'd you say?
What happens when PJ Washington doesn't get named the starter tonight? Is there a gigantic panic sell-off again?
I mean, there shouldn't be, since we just saw that happen and we still know what it looked like. I mean, last time there was, I think, some concern because the last time he came off the bench, he played 6 minutes. Nobody expected that to happen again, but there was, a real chance that he was just going to go, play like 24 minutes or something. But they basically just used Nick Richards as a spot starter. So 32 minutes or so from Washington, I think, regardless.
Yeah, I gave him 30 just to be safe. And he's still probably the best play on FanDuel today at power forward center. So I like the Charlotte side. If this game stays competitive, getting Kelly Oubre and Miles Bridges at basically no ownership on FanDuel is very appealing to me. And then we go to the Milwaukee side. Again, 230 total, big favorites. This is where we're starting to see ownership. Giannis, Holiday, Middleton, Portis, Grayson Allen, all in double digits in ownership. Allen's a little short on DraftKings, but we're talking like 15 to 25 across the board. DeMarcus Cousins potentially making his debut for the Milwaukee Bucks today as well. Let's talk about Milwaukee. I don't think that anybody individually just stands out, but I do want to cycle through all of it because this is a massive pace up spot and a really nice just outlook in general.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most favorable spots we've talked about so far. It's a great spot against Charlotte. They play fast. They don't play defense. The pricing on Milwaukee really isn't that tight either. Giannis at 12-1 obviously is really expensive. He's
Bones Highland's health and safety protocols.
Wait, what?
Bones Highland is now out today as well.
Oh, great. Campazzo, I guess. Howard.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, it just popped up, which is just, dude, the Nuggets need to just take a break.
Yeah, it sucks. That team, when they're healthy, is so fun, and they're just never healthy.
If they were fully healthy, you could I wouldn't be surprised if they made the finals. And now it's not even close.
Be good for a long time too.
Yeah. And apologies for cutting you off for Milwaukee.
That's a really good team when they're healthy. But yeah, as far as Milwaukee goes, I mean, Giannis is more expensive than Jokic. He's not as good a per minute guy, but he is still the second best per minute producer in the league. And he's not he's center eligible, but he doesn't have only center eligibility. So it's a little bit easier to get him into lineups. So he looks great if you can get there. Bobby Portis at only 6,800 looks good here. Drew Holiday's salary is sub 7K. Middleton's at 7,400. I think that any of those guys look good. Even 4,400 for Grayson Allen, assuming he's going to play around 30 minutes here. I just want to get to a lot of this team.
Same. And I don't have any priorities. I just want to rotate through all of them. I don't know if I need 26% owned Bobby Portis on FanDuel at 6,500, but I'll happily just take a little bit more Grayson Allen in that spot or something along those lines. I'm worried that Cousins can eat 2 minutes or a couple minutes from Portis.
Yeah, he could. But his salary dropped too, at least on DraftKings. I think even if you get 30 minutes from Portis, he looks good at 6,800.
Yeah. So this is sort of like the Duarte thing where I very clearly think that Bobby Portis is a good play today. I don't know if 26% on FanDuel makes a ton of sense on a 9-gamer.
Yeah, that's
all. Nothing crazy here. But yeah, happy to cycle through. Jokic over Giannis.
Yeah, but the issue is the position. I think Jokic's projection is higher, but it might be a little bit easier to get to Giannis just because you can roster him forward.
That's fair. FanDuel on the old drugs. They have Giannis with small forward eligibility now. He'd be closer to just center this year than small forward. They're just making shit up as they go. All right, we got another game that we can actually talk about. Dallas at New Orleans. The Mavs are 3.5-point favorites at the Pels, 212 total. Luka, 13% owned on FanDuel, 10 on DraftKings. We've got Jalen Brunson, 10 to 15 across both sites. We've got a Q tag on Kristaps Porzingis for today. He has an injured ankle. No Willie Cauley-Stein, doesn't matter. No Frank Ntilikina, probably doesn't matter. What do you like for Dallas?
I mean, Luka's been really difficult to get to this year. Obviously, he's really good. Obviously, he gives you a really high ceiling. He's just in the same price range as Jokic and Giannis, and not on the same level of them in terms of fantasy production. So he's pretty difficult to get to, especially because normally he still pulls some ownership just off of name value. Also, having guard and forward eligibility makes it a little bit easier to get to him. But I think there's still a drop off in projection between him and those guys. Porzingis looks fine at 8,200. I think Jalen Brunson's the one that looks the best though. 5K flat, just kind of a incorrect price tag. Not really sure how he got there just because he missed games. But he came back, played 22 minutes last game. I think it's likely you see him pretty quickly get back to the 28 to 30 minutes that he was playing prior to the injury.
Yeah, I gave him 30 for right now, and I think he still looks really good. A guy that I'd like to get to, and I can very easily get north of 30 if I needed to. So
yeah, like if I go to like 26 to 28 minutes, he starts to look like a good play. If I go above that, he just starts to look great.
Yep, we're on the same page there. Luka behind Jokic and Giannis.
Yeah, especially if he's going to pull some ownership.
Absolutely. On the Pelicans side, nothing too crazy here. Just still no Zion, although he has been cleared for 5-on-5. So there's that.
Yeah.
Ingram.
I'm not looking forward to that just because it's going to make this team even messier to talk about.
You would think. Ingram and Hart, both about 15% owned. Devontae Graham is there as well on DraftKings. I understand why all those guys are getting some ownership. They're okay plays. I don't see priorities here, though.
No, but I do see some good pricing. I mean, Ingram at 7,500, when you have a 30% usage rate, there's a nice ceiling there at that salary. Valanciunas played about 32 and a half minutes last game. That kind of reinforces what you and I had been talking about, that it was kind of tough to gauge his minutes recently because there had been blowouts. There was a game where he was in massive foul trouble as well. But then we finally got a game where it ended up being a blowout in their favor. But we got a game where, for the most part, it was normal rotations. And Valanciunas played about 32 and a half minutes, lost like 2.5 minutes to garbage time. I think expecting 32 to 33 minutes from him on average is reasonable. Expecting him to make 7 3-pointers is not reasonable, but still has a very high ceiling. He's around 1.25 fantasy points per minute in the games that Ingram has played this year. Josh Hart's still pretty cheap at 5,500. Devontae Graham is dirt cheap at 4,600. He's difficult to rely on because he's giving up usage to Ingram, to Valanciunas, some to Alexander Walker when they're on the floor together, but he's still certainly capable of beating that price tag in 30 to 32 minutes of action. So not a lot that I'm confident in here, but I do think I'll be getting, at least the way things look right now, value-wise, I think I'll be getting to a decent amount of Graham, Hart, Ingram, Valanciunas.
They're starting to call him Dirk Valanciunas. That was the report that I saw, which is incredible. Jordan, you there? Go to Basketball Reference and pull up Kobe's page, please. I got to put this one to bed now. It's driving me insane. When you get to his page, scroll to the adjusted shooting table. And when you do that, in the league adjusted true shooting column, you'll see that Kobe was league average efficient or higher every single season of his career until he turned 35. So the Kobe was inefficient narrative that is going on in chat. Adjusted shooting. Okay. And then there's a column on the right that's TS plus. Just like wave the mouse on top of that. All of those numbers are 100 or higher from the time that he came into the league, which, by the way, is 18. So he was league average efficiency at 18, all the way until he turned 35. He was at the minimum average efficiency or higher on teams where he was dominating the basketball. So let's just go ahead and put that one to bed. Sorry, Jeremy, had to do that to you.
Yeah, it's kind of like people are confusing the arguments. Like the Kobe argument is always relative to being like the literal best player in the history of the league.
Yeah.
Not to like whether he was just like actually not good.
Yeah. People are just nuts. Just absolutely nuts. But I had to take that one to task because I hate Kobe and I still know that he was exceptional and not inefficient.
Kobe was top 5 every season with an average efficiency. Weird. No, he was like 1,000,000% usage guy. Average efficiency on that kind of usage is unbelievably good.
Yeah. He was slightly above average efficiency at like 34% usage. That is astronomical to think about. Not to mention, still getting people involved, 25% assist rate for all of that. Like, there were a couple spots where he started getting super gunny, and he was still above average in efficiency when everybody knew what was happening. There it is. All right, we got 2 games to go. Let's hit you with Houston at Oklahoma City. Adam, we're doing it again. Rockets 3-point dogs in OKC, 214 total. Oh, God. So we know no Jalen Green, no DJ Augustine, no Usman Garuba for Houston. On the Oklahoma City side, no Kenrich Williams, no Derek Favors, Mike Muscala questionable. We've got Kevin Porter Jr. projected for 19% ownership on FanDuel, 8 on DraftKings. I'll believe that shit when I see it. He's going to be 40% owned tonight. Eric Gordon is 10% owned on FanDuel. Jayshawn Tate is the highest owned guy in this game across both sites. What do we do with Houston?
Another team like Orlando that I hate, but I mean, this is they're running, back the game we had the other day, and it's a really appealing game because normally, basically pricing, it's gotten more expensive, but in general, pricing on Houston and Oklahoma City is a little bit cheaper than it should be because they get blown out so often. It lowers their average playing time. But in a game between these two horrible teams, it's only a 3-point spread. It's likely to be a competitive game. So you're likely to get 36 minutes from Christian Wood at 8,900. You're likely to get 36 minutes from Kevin Porter at 7,400. Jayshawn Tate's likely to play 30 to 32 minutes. You just get a lot of pieces that look pretty good here because it just is a lot more likely that you get full run from these guys tonight than that you do in most games. Eric Gordon played about 30 minutes last game. Garrison Matthews played 32 and a half. Armani Brooks played 24 and a half. He is close to minimum salary. He's someone I think you can look to if better value doesn't open. So there's a ton of pieces to get to from Houston.
I know, and that sucks, doesn't it? It's awful. It's truly awful. I don't know what to do with these guys half the time. Like, Kevin Porter Jr., point guard, small forward on FanDuel at 6,800. We have projected for 19% ownership. I cannot believe 19% ownership right now. To me, that's impossible. I think it's got to be higher, given what we just saw 2 days ago. His price went up $500. I understand that is not an insignificant amount. He was 50% owned on Monday.
Are you talking about Christian Wood on FanDuel or Kevin
Porter?
On FanDuel? Yeah.
Porter on FanDuel.
Yeah, he's going to be higher than 19% at 6,800.
Yeah. Like, I have him at 19, which means that he's probably going to be like 40. Yeah. So why would I listen to chat over professionals? Please stop. I'm the professional, man. I gave you the information. And you mentioned paid professional. I'm the paid professional, literally. I get paid to do that to you. No one's taking an L. You got to take that L, man. Somebody mentioned, like, Josh, you got to ignore chat. I mean, Jeremy Savage is in here every day. He's not like a full-on rando like this Mr. Baseball character who thinks
he's in
Karis LeVert. Really? I don't recognize the name. Jeremy Savage, I recognize for sure. Who's your favorite play on Houston today? Because on DraftKings, I think it's really hard to look at.
Yeah, I mean, they all look relative to each other. I think they all look pretty similar. So I guess in that case, I would just look at ownership. And I mean, if Armani Brooks is going to get 4% ownership at 3,500, that's probably my favorite play. Given the way value looks right now. I'm not saying it in the sense that, like, I'm super confident in Armani Brooks doing anything, but this slate's short on value. You have Houston missing, normal rotation pieces or a normal rotation piece in Jalen Green. Brooks found 24 and a half minutes off the bench last game. He's a 0.81 DraftKings point per minute guy this year. I think he was similar last year. I'm going back to check that now. If he's not going to get any ownership, I like him a lot. If he does get a lot of ownership, then obviously I'll just go somewhere else.
He's the best leverage play I've got on DraftKings right now for Houston. So I'm with you on that one. Well, let's do it again. Let's switch to the opposite side. Oklahoma City. At least Oklahoma City is like, you got to play 4 guys and 4 guys only, basically. Shea is 10 to 15% owned. Lou Dort is 20% owned. Josh Giddey is 15 to 25% owned, depending on the site. Darius Baisley is 30% owned on FanDuel. I'm going to let you guys know right now, don't do that. 13% owned on DraftKings. Jeremiah Robinson Earl at 4,400 on DK is certainly playable at 8% ownership. Breakdown OKC, who I think is just look a lot better than Houston.
Yeah, I mean, OKC's actually been decent defensively this year. They don't play quite as fast as Houston. Houston playing at the second fastest pace in the league. Gilgeous-Alexander looks good at 8,300. Giddey looks good at 6,600. Lou Dort was shockingly high owned the other night and let everyone down, but still, in a pretty good spot here at 5,600. The issue with Dort, and I talked about it prior to the last game, he's not a bad fantasy option. Even when Gilgeous-Alexander is in, he has about a 21.5% usage rate. He's averaged 0.84 DraftKings points per minute for the season. The issue is that his usage rate drops like 4 points when he plays alongside Gilgeous-Alexander. He doesn't do a lot in the way of rebounding. He doesn't do a lot in the way of playmaking. So you're getting a scoring dependent guy at high ownership with a 21% usage rate. That's just not a great spot to be at. So it's not really a knock on Dort or the matchup. It's just that I think people go to him, or at least last time, went to him a little bit too heavily, but still a decent projection there. 4,800 for Bazley is a good price point. Robinson Earl looks fine. Trey Mann at 3,500 played 30 minutes off the bench last game. He got garbage run for about 5 minutes, but even if you call it 24, 25 minutes, it's basically the same idea as Armani Brooks on the other side.
I hate this team so much. I truly, truly do. Can we talk about how bad Darius Bazley is?
What'd you say?
Can we talk about how bad Darius Bazley is?
Feel free.
I'm
sure someone in here thinks he's a top 20 player.
Yeah. I project his true shooting at 48%. It's 44 this year, 49 last year, and 50 in his rookie year. He might be one of the worst offensive players in basketball. 27, 29% three-point shooting these past 2 years. He doesn't get any assists. He basically like mildly defensive rebounds, and that's it. I don't know why he plays.
Josh Lloyd had asked the other day who the worst current rotation player is and who the best non-rotation player is.
Yeah,
and,
I got the answer right too.
Yeah. Who was your answer for worst rotation player, Bazley, or someone else?
I didn't answer, but it is Bazley to me.
Okay. I was like, I couldn't think of anyone like specifically off the top of my head, but I'd seen someone else say Bazley. Someone said Bertans, which as a Wizards fan, I wholeheartedly agree with.
But that's also a preposterous answer.
He is awful.
Yeah, but Davis Bertans actualized has an NBA skill.
What is it?
Well, it should be three-point shooting.
He hasn't been able to shoot in 2 years.
Sure. I'm with you there. When he got his deal, he was coming off like a crazy, ridiculous shooting season. Like
I went from thinking Bertans, like I used to argue that Bertans was like way better than anyone understood. And now I'm just on the complete other end. Like this guy should not be playing basketball. But anyway, Bazley not playing well. But from a fantasy standpoint, he's still fine. He's at 0.82 DraftKings points per minute. He's likely to give you around 30 minutes. So totally different conversation between good real life player and DFS.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just gross. I mean, Bazley needs every one of those minutes. That's the thing. Like, it's becoming problematic. I think he plays because they don't have any other options. Anything else here for Oklahoma City? Is Houston, Oklahoma City the swing game on the slate today?
I think so, just like it was last time. I mean, today at least you have the Milwaukee-Charlotte game that should play a big role. The Atlanta-Indiana game is going to play a big role. But yeah, Houston, Oklahoma City is going to have a lot of ownership as well.
Oh my God. Chat, you're crazy. Darius Bazley is going to be out of the league in 2 years. He's dreadful. What's Bertans shooting right now? How bad has it been?
I don't know, 10%.
God damn.
He might have more rebounds than 3-point field goals. Not saying a lot.
What did he shoot from three last year, do you think? He played 1,400 minutes.
35.
39. Yeah. So coming off of 43, 42. Look, it's been bad this year, but Bertans and Darius Bazley are not comparable.
Bertans' true shooting percentage this year is 39.2%.
Yeah, it's not good.
The man is paid to do nothing but shoot a basketball.
64 last year. That's 90th percentile. I think you're being ultra mean to Davis Bertans for last year. Are you taking out some extra Laffy hate here?
Yeah, that's what it is. I really just, I don't, maybe there was a split last year where after he got hurt or something, he was worse because or maybe it was just, I'm remembering down the stretch, like he was absolutely awful.
Do they still have? Okay, so let me look at it. Dunks and threes allows you to like see a rolling average of his estimated plus minus. He was really bad in February, but March and April were like pretty good. And then when he started playing April towards the end of the season, like his April and May was pretty good.
Really?
Yeah. But he had a really rough March or really rough February when he started all the way to March. And then he didn't exactly have a great late May, June.
Maybe that's what I'm remembering was him just being like really bad, like in the postseason.
Yeah. Because, I mean, 39% from three, 64% true shooting. Like he can only have so many bad stretches before like that becomes impossible.
Before it looks like this year.
Yeah. Because this year is, that's a steaming pile so far in 178 minutes. I mean, he hasn't missed a free throw yet. So I guess there's something you could hang his hat on.
Yeah. The 6'10" dude that is shooting 39.2% true shooting with 0 blocks and a 6% rebounding percentage.
Yeah. And it's literally 0 blocks.
Yeah.
Like they don't even have the percentage in here. It's just a blank space. All right, let's close this out. Sacramento at the LA Clippers. Sacramento 7.5 point dogs on the LA back-to-back. 215 total here. It's another one where we don't really have anything that we can talk about for Sacramento right now. Questionable on Barnes, Harkless, Bagley. That will matter considerably to guys like Chimezie Metu, who are pulling ownership right now, but won't if those guys all end up in. I left Barnes out. I left Mo Harkless out. I did put Bagley in. There's not a lot of ownership coming in here, but I want to get to the Sacramento starters today, no matter who ends up in or out.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. Really difficult at this point to gauge who is going to be in or out. Bagley, I believe, was an illness yesterday. Harkless was out again. But Richaun Holmes at only 5,800, he came back. He had missed, I think, 3 games with an eye injury followed by a non-COVID illness. He's been productive all season long. He typically is going to give you 28 to 30 minutes. Yesterday, he played 33 and a half, lost 2.5 minutes to garbage time. That's notable because this is either his first or second game under Gentry. So there's the potential that he's going to play more. Also, you did have first. Okay. Yeah. So also you did have multiple guys out, so that could have contributed to it, but certainly the potential for Holmes to play more minutes under the new coach as well. But even if he plays 28 to 30 minutes, he's going to look really good at 5,800. Davion Mitchell at 3,600, if more value doesn't open up, certainly looks good. He is around a 0.8 fantasy point per minute guy. He's likely to play mid to upper 20s in minutes. And, again, it's just right now there's not a ton of cheap value. So it makes Mitchell look better. If Bagley and Harkless are out, you can go right back to Metu. He played 36 minutes last night. If Harkless and Bagley are in, Metu is still fine. His salary dropped $300. If they're in, you're probably looking at like 22 to 24 minutes, but there's always the potential for him to play more if he's playing well. But even in 22 to 24 minutes, he's going to look good at 3,800. If those guys are out, he looks like arguably the best value play on the slate.
If those guys happen to be in, you're not playing Chimezie Metu at all on FanDuel. It's going to be impossible. He is 4,400 and center only. So if those guys start to get ruled in, Chimezie Metu is not going to be all that great of a value at 4,400 without being able to play one of the other positions. So stupid that he is center only. It makes zero sense, but FanDuel's been asleep at the wheel like this for most of it. I like Buddy Hield for shooting guard, small forward, 5,800 on FanDuel. 3% owned. I had too much yesterday, but he plays 30 to 32 minutes basically every single game. One of these days he's going to shoot himself into something, but I like him as a GPP option here.
Sorry, who was
Hield 5,800 shooting guard, small forward on FanDuel, 3% owned. Like him as a GPP guy.
Yeah, I mean the minutes are there. It's Buddy Hield being Buddy Hield, but
yep.
Yeah, that's kind of, you're not going into it saying, oh, everybody's wrong and Buddy Hield's going to have a great game. You're going in saying if Buddy Hield does happen to have a great game, which certainly he can, the opportunities are there. It's going to pay me off really nicely.
We close it out with the Clippers, and very clearly one of the best, if not the best plays on FanDuel today is in this matchup. We've got Reggie Jackson, 10 to 15% owned, Marcus Morris at 18 on FanDuel, 15 for Bledsoe on FanDuel, a little bit less ownership on DraftKings. Paul George, 10-2 on DraftKings, still getting 13% owned. Here's where it gets nice, though. Shooting guard, small forward eligible Paul George on FanDuel, 35% ownership at 8,600. Paul George looks pretty damn good today.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, he looks fine on DraftKings at 10 too.
Right.
8,600 is a joke. Like 9,200 the other day, it was just like, man, what are they doing? And then they went lower. So 1.31 DraftKings points per minute, 1.26 FanDuel points per minute, averaging about 36 minutes per game this year. Looks fine on DraftKings, looks great on FanDuel. I think that Marcus Morris at 4,400 on DraftKings is really interesting. He didn't play last game for rest on the second half of a back-to-back, but on the front half of that back-to-back, he played 34 minutes and then lost 4 minutes to garbage time. He's not restricted at all, it doesn't appear. If you're going to get mid-30s in minutes from him at 4,400 on a slate with questionable value in a good spot, he's going to look good. Zubats at 5,100 looks fine. Bledsoe at 4,900 looks fine. He's certainly hit or miss, but he can play 30-plus minutes in a good matchup here. Reggie Jackson's playing a ton this year. This is another game where, obviously who we like on Sacramento is going to depend on who exactly is available, but there's going to be a lot of guys from this game that end up in my lineups.
Yeah. And the problem, I really wish there was another late game. We're going to have a ton of information on our lineups heading into this game. And kind of the way we started this show is going to be the way that we end this show as well. You should be going into this 10:30 game tonight re-optimizing every one of your lineups for everything that we know, and either making some adjustments for places where you need to get a little bit different to save that lineup, or vice versa. But we're going to get a ton of information. We might not have that until those 8:00 games start, but you're going to have some parts that you can move around. And I assume a pretty sizable chunk of ownership to, if we're talking about just individual games, Sacramento and the Clippers is going to rank pretty highly in terms of aggregate ownership.
Are you doing anything on FanDuel as far as just like kind of strategy wise, the way that you're making lineups, assuming we don't have news? Because on DraftKings, I don't think it's going to matter much. Rashawn Holmes is a good play no matter who is in or out. Davion Mitchell is a good play no matter who is in or out. Chimezie Metu's a good play regardless. He's just better if guys are out. So like, I'm not worried about being in a position at 9:30 where I'm just like, shit, I don't have, spots for Chimezie Metu. But like you were saying on FanDuel, if everybody's in, Metu's really tough to get to. If he's out, he looks great. Are you doing anything strategy-wise?
So I don't mind getting to Metu to start at 4,400, assuming that Bagley ends up in, and that becomes the problem. Bagley also has center eligibility in his 4K. So like if I need to move from one to the other, or like offload some Metu to Bagley, I can. I don't really know what Harkless does to this equation if he ends up in. Like that becomes a little bit complicated. I don't really know what minutes he immediately grabs. I mean, obviously like Lewis King stops playing, but I don't think that there's anything that I'm going to specifically do. I might set a rule to force at least 2 pieces of this game anytime someone's going to be like, I don't want just one piece of it. Maybe if it's Paul George, that's okay with me. Like if I just get Paul George or Fox, Halliburton, Hield, I don't care if I get a second piece from a late swap. But if I'm getting anybody else, I might want to force a second person just because of the way, especially with FanDuel, where you can only have one center, you kind of need that extra flexibility. It's a little bit easier to move around on DraftKings. Nothing too crazy though.
Deep dive later. I figured other people might be interested.
That's good. I definitely love the prompt of a question that you completely ignore the moment. I don't know. You probably stopped listening before you even finished talking.
Yeah, I was just listening to my voice and then just let you on and was doing other stuff on my computer.
Fantastic. Well, look, it's a good question nonetheless. Either way, deep dive later today, deeper dive tonight.
Yep.
There it is, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Go back and watch the process show where I detailed how Karis LeVert isn't all that good. Go back and watch the contenders videos where I rank my top 10 plays of the day on FanDuel and DK. Watch this show again because it was fun. Hit the like button if you haven't. 630 people, 135 likes. We had a pretty good time here. Chat was rousing today. The chat numbers will be high. Thank you to PrizePicks for being the presenting sponsor. Good luck tonight, everybody. We'll talk to you later.